Hey, hey, hey. It is 5:30. I am yelling because I'm excited. Very excited to be here to talk to all of you and I'm so glad you joined me. Okay, I'll calm down. Thank you so much for doing so. It has been a week. It feels like it's been a long time since the last time I held this podcast. So, I am feeling really good today, and I have a lot to share with you. And we are going to take a short break from talking about kids who can see ghosts today in specific detail. I'm actually going to talk about neglected children, and it is a topic that I'm passionate about. Other than neglected children, I'm sorry, other than who can see ghosts. And the reason that I decided to make this blog is from the request of a listener. She contacted me and she mentioned that she wanted to learn more about neglected children and even neglected children who can see ghosts, which was interesting to me. And I think she was someone who was actively responding to me on the podcast one day. So I promised her that I would write that blog, and I did. And if you guys have requests like that, we can also put that onto the blog as well and discuss it in detail for all of you. So if you want to do something like that, like come onto the actual podcast, you can. You can get on Podbean and talk to me live, Podbean, Podbean. And you can also reach me by email, kidscanseeghosts@gmail.com, or use my phone number, 765-205-1959. I am actually live right now on 3 different sites. One is Facebook. The other is Instagram at Dr. Lisa 3, or on Instagram at Kids Can See Ghosts. Is it Can You? I can't even remember. I think it's Kids Can See Ghosts. And that's my handle. So make sure if you want to hear these blogs live while I tell the story, you can do that on Instagram or Facebook. So let's get started. One of the things that I want you to always remember about the blogs that I write is that they are actually true and have happened to me, and they also happened as I worked as a psychologist. So some of this stuff is many years ago. And so a lot of these kids are grown now. Don't forget that they're grown. The kids in earlier blogs are who I'm referring to. A lot of them are probably, God, I'm old now, guys. A lot of those kids are probably close to 30 now, a lot of them, or at least their mid 20s. The younger ones, the ones that were in elementary school, like child A. And then some of the teenagers are obviously, close to they're about 30 now. So really old. I think I can officially say that now because I've had the big one, the 50th birthday. So I think I can officially say I'm old now. Some of you don't understand that yet, but you will. Let's talk about having empathy for other people. This is almost a subject that I shouldn't have to talk about, and you guys shouldn't have to hear about, but unfortunately for this blog I decided to add it. I hear a lot of negative comments about children, and that includes teenagers. And I hear a lot of negative comments because people naturally assume that either parents are bad or innately bad, that care for these children or do not care for them, or they assume that the reason that these kids are not cared for is for things such as the parents being on drugs and things like that. Now, obviously, we can't deny that those things happen because they do, right? Right. But what if it's just a matter of a parent not being paid, right? And so they couldn't get their kids any shoes until they get paid. How many times as parents do we say, "Don't ask me until I get paid. Don't ask me until I get paid." Or you buy a kid a pair of Adidas, like I did for Christmas, a pair of brand new $100-something Adidas, and that was Christmas. By the end of February, those Adidas were torn up. You know what I said, if you know me well enough. Okay, well, you don't care enough to take care of your shoes. Then I'm not buying any. So you better wash those and you better figure out a way to wear them until you take care of your stuff better. Because I don't believe in rewarding kids with things if they're not good stewards of the things that you give to them. So somebody has not taken care of her shoes yet, so I have not bought her any. Now, I was told my kids can hear this podcast from upstairs, so they're probably listening, laughing, and she's probably like, oh man, I'm not getting any shoes still. No, you are not until you earn them. So what if it's just something simple like that? What if a parent lost their job? You know, there are a lot of things that come into play, but what we tend to do is we tend to prejudge people before we know the story. And so I hear those things and I see those things, and I hear a lot of, you know, staff, teachers, and other professionals who sometimes category, and it's not all, it's some, who will categorize kids like this, you know, as not having anyone take care of them, or their hair is disheveled, no one cares. Sometimes I think these judgment calls are pretty harsh. They're pretty harsh. And so it's okay to ask questions and to doubt, you know, yourself about your preconceived notions when you work with children. So that is something that, you know, as psychologists or as aspiring psychologists, therapists, social workers, counselors, etc., we have to learn, which is to remove our biases, stereotypes, and negative thoughts. And I'll tell you why. When I wrote this blog, I have had a really good example of this. There was a child who walked up to me out of the blue and said, I have to clean up this weekend. And I said, oh, that's good, because I believe in kids, you know, doing their part at home and learning chores. It gives them responsibility. And then I said, that's good. And he said, well, I have to clean up my room because we're going to lose our apartment. And then I said, oh, okay. I said, is that what the landlord said? Because kids are smart. Never underestimate them. Ask them flat out. If they don't know what a landlord is, you tell them. This kid knew. Yes, told my mother that we need to clean up. And if we don't start cleaning up, then we're going to get evicted. And I said, oh, okay. I said, well, what do you think you should do to help? And this kid said, well, I am going to spend the weekend cleaning up. And I said, well, very good. And I know your mom would be really happy to have your help, because cleaning up is not always an easy thing to do. And so this child said, yeah, it's not going to be easy, but I'm going to do it. And I said, okay, well, let me know how that goes for you. And someone had whispered to me, I think you should call Child Services, which is DCFS in Illinois. They're going to lose their home, and we need to do something about it, because this is possibly child neglect and homelessness, and I want to make sure that this child has somewhere to go. And I said, no, we are not calling DCFS on this parent. Absolutely not. Some people have never lived that kind of life. You know, they don't know what it's like to possibly get evicted or lose their home. It's not a good feeling. I am one who knows what that feels like. It's not a good feeling. It didn't mean that I wasn't a good mom when some of those things happened to me. It's just that at the time we were going through something bad. And so that's how I tend to look at kids, from the lens of, okay, let's see how this resolves itself. This kid is not in imminent danger or harm to themselves, or no one's trying to hurt them. They're actually trying to fix a problem. And so I said, this is not a good time to call DCFS. You don't have any grounds. For one, the kid is not homeless. There's the potential for the child to be homeless. And that's something that we can cross over and deal with, when if that happened. And so that was a Friday. And as I wrote in the blog, guess what happened? This is a kid who always walked up to me and told me every single thing. I don't even know why. This little one just did it. And so he walked up to me and he said, guess what happened? And I'm like, what happened? Now pause right there, because remember, you want to establish rapport with kids. And so if he did not trust me, he wouldn't tell me, right? And he definitely wouldn't have told me the conclusion. And if I had to call the state in the moment, then what would have happened if he found out, and if his mom found out that the state was called because he told what happened? It would have been a negative outcome. So he came right up to me and he said, I had to clean up all weekend. We cleaned up all weekend. And I said, ugh, cleaning up all weekend would get on my nerves. And, because you want to try to make things very realistic for kids. And his response, yeah, I cleaned all weekend, but we got it done. And I said, I bet your mother was so happy. And basically the kid was saying, yeah, it got on my nerves too. I don't think I put all that stuff in the blog, but we did it. And I said, well, what happened? Can you tell me? So what did that do? That opened up the door to whether or not they were homeless. It's all in timing. It's all in being prepared. It's all about, how you are able to gather information from kids. And if they're not in danger, it's okay to let it go some and find out what happens. And that's what I did. It's like taking a deep breath before you speak. Sometimes when I pause in the podcast, it's because I'm actually taking a deep breath before I speak. And this little one said we were able to keep our place or our apartment. And I said, that's fantastic. And this kid hugged me, walked away to class, and I said, I am really proud of you. From that day forward, everything that happened in this child's life, I knew. And I wound up having a conversation with the mom, and you know what happened? Mom lost her job. And the landlord was basically telling her, and I didn't write this in the blog, clean up, keep it clean, you can stay. I know you'll find another job. So this was not a case where this kid was actually going to be homeless. You have to get to the root of the story. However, in looking at this kid, the first response from another professional was to call the state when the mom actually lost her job. You see what I did with this kid? I asked that in the blog. You see what I did? I waited. And the kid came to me and told me. So the family was suffering a loss. And when the family suffered a loss, the way that it was interpreted to this kid was, we have to keep her place clean up. But the mom didn't say it's because she lost her job. I mean, we don't typically tell our kids all those details anyway. But if you establish rapport with the kid and you remove your personal experiences and biases toward each child, then guess what? It will open up the door for you to be able to have a conversation, and you will gather more information. Because anyway, I don't know if any of you have ever called the state on the child, but DCFS in particular wants to know a whole host of information. And sometimes it's so much information that the kids and I, when I do have to report their parents, we sit there and we type it together because sometimes it's a lot of information. And so you have to have that kind of bond with these kids or develop that kind of rapport so that they will give you all of that information, because that's your job. You don't want to miss out on any pivotal information to that child's case. Now, if that child had told me we lost our place, we're going to be homeless, before I called the state, I would have definitely called the mother and asked what's going on and how can I help. And then if we couldn't help, then getting the school district on board. Most school districts have some ways of helping their homeless children, and then also, you know, getting the state involved to help give them services for, to address their homelessness. So there are a lot of different things you can do. And so the reason that I brought that up primarily in the beginning of this podcast is because this is a child who seemed as if he was neglected. And my response was to have a little bit more empathy, more so than putting my psychology hat on specifically and asking, are you homeless? Are you this? Are you suicidal? Are you homicidal? Are you, looking for emotional dysregulation and all those different things? It was just a simple conversation. That's actually the tactic that I use with nebulous children as well, which is what gets them to start talking at some point about their experiences with seeing ghosts. And I'm chuckling a little bit because it seems manipulative, and I guess it kind of is, but at the same time, it gets you the information that you need. It gets them the information that you need, gets you the information that you need about your clients. And so we encounter a whole lot of different people, and we constantly have to make a lot of decisions in order to problem solve situations for families. So I was armed and ready to problem solve this potential homeless situation with this family. And something that I always tell my students is that a lot of this problem solving ability happens on the fly and it's pretty quick. You also have to know exactly what you are dealing with, discussing, and you have to use your training in order to get through some of this stuff. Now, when it comes to, working with neglected children, there are a lot of parents who do not neglect their children on purpose. Let me say that from day one. Again, there can be a situation that occurred that caused some of the neglect. But parents who truly care about their kids, if the kids are neglected, you have to get to the root of the problem because not all of it is done on purpose. Okay. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't have to make a referral to the state. Let's be clear about that. There's medical neglect, so that's another category of neglect. So there's a lot of different, avenues for neglect. So you have to be careful. So that's why I waited with that child I just spoke of to see what was happening before I called the state. Now, when you do have to contact Children's Services, or here in Illinois, we call it DCFS. I don't know what I was thinking about. You do that because you do want to protect children. Now, honestly, I haven't had to call or write a DCFS report in over 20 years until now. I'm writing too many now. So this was a really good blog for me today because I'm also going to vent because I'm tired of writing those reports. I'm tired of writing those reports about neglected and abused children. I have what is it called? It's not anger. When people abuse kids, a disgust within me over abuse and neglect. When it is so harmful to kids, the psychological damage of abuse, it just makes me boil. And I'm writing too many of those reports. So I am mandated to do so. Some of you are mandated to do so. So parents, we don't have a choice. When we have to call, we have to call. When we have to write the report, we have to write the report. And so I haven't had to do that as much as I am now. And my days as of the past 2 to 3 weeks have been, and at the time of this blog, I hadn't written a report to DCFS in 20 years. So here we are. When did I write this? Just probably November 21, December 21. So just in about 4 months, I am writing report after report to DCFS. So we still have to do it when we suspect or have knowledge of abuse. You have to do it. And so I think I want to go in a little bit of a different direction, because when we talk about abuse, I am going to talk about domestic violence, and it's because there are far too many cases of domestic violence. Now, here's the thing when it comes to abuse. Domestic situations that are domestic can be abusive too toward children. And I'm not just talking about physical abuse, I'm also talking of emotional abuse. And have had to report cases like that of emotional abuse, which is extremely damaging, just like physical abuse. And so, listen, ladies, because I'm talking to you, there are a lot of women who share with me that their kids do not remember acts of violence toward them. They tell me stuff like, no, my kids don't remember when their father hit me in the face and threw me up against the wall and hit me in the head with, damn it, anything, right? And I recall probably one of the worst cases of domestic violence I've ever been involved with. I remember the mother telling me about what happened to her, and in that moment, the husband threw her so hard into a wooden chair that her body broke the chair. And she specifically said, my son will never remember this. Now, he could not remember. He won't. He's too little. Now, let me tell you something. We could talk about trauma all day long, but I'm going to remind you of something else by sharing what this kid did and why this kid started coming to see me. So the mother was not my client, it was the son. The son was physically abusive to the girlfriend, physically abusive toward women, right? And the other thing is, this child was becoming physically abusive toward his mother. The other thing is, this was an angry kid at school on the football field. Anger manifested this child's life at the time. So the mother said to me, my son will not remember any of this between his father and I. He just won't do it. And I said, okay. That surprised you? It probably should, because I'm so talkative. So I said, okay, all right. So then I had a chance to start seeing the son right after I interviewed the mother, knowing that the reason he was coming to see me is because of all of the anger and the violence that he was inflicting upon females, right? Where the heck do you think he got that kind of behavior from? The reason the mom said that is because she thought that she shielded him from all of that, and that she actually divorced the father. So she thought, okay, getting rid of the dad, he's going to grow up not remembering because he was so young. Guess what? He did remember. And he was very hateful toward his mother. He was mad at women. He never liked how his mother, according to him, allowed his dad to do that. Now, you and I know that he was a kid and his thinking was off with that comment. That's what he said. I still remember them to this day. And so the cycle of violence continued because now this teenager has started abusing women. And the mother just cried. I was not afraid to be alone with this kid. For some reason, he was very gentle with me. I don't know. Sometimes people get like that towards psychologists. I don't know if you guys think we're reading your minds or what, but we're not. And so I remember him being very soft spoken and very gentle with me. And I was able to work really well with this kid. But he did remember because I asked him specifically about anything, as we went on in therapy, anything that he did remember to get to the bottom of his anger. And you know what example he used? When his mother was thrown into that wooden chair. And I said to the mom, he remembers that moment. He was 3 years old. He remembered. People typically remember things in their past starting at 3 years old. Now, some of us can and some of us can't. I can't remember things from when I was 3 years old. My husband can remember things very clearly from the time he was about 2 or 3, and his brain is always interesting to me. That's a different story. But most of us cannot do that. But this is a kid who can do it, and this mother cried. This mother cried. I know there are a lot of questions as to why abuse occurs. In that example, this, okay, so I'm a behaviorist, and so I believe that all behaviors are learned. And I believe in this case, this child learned violence from his father. In a lot of the cases with boys, ladies, they learn these behaviors at home from what they see. And typically they go out, if they can't control themselves, and do the same things to women. Now, what do little girls do? I'm sure you can guess. They allow it to happen. It's so scary to kids, guys. And so this is just some of the reasons why, we have to talk openly about these things and also refer, these kids who are victims to DCFS. Any abuse, you go ahead and you report it. I have a lot of stories about domestic violence, actually, and it's the reason why I won't work at or volunteer. I do a lot of volunteer work, and it's the reason why I will not work or volunteer in a domestic violence shelter. I actually had, and I know I didn't write this in the blog. One time I was working with an abused wife, and I actually had a father come after me once over it. Yeah, I actually had a dad. Well, he wasn't a father. I'm sorry, he was her husband. He came after me because we, meaning the company that I work with, we put the mother in a domestic violence shelter with their children. And the father came after me in particular, but the agency. It is a hard thing for me to deal with, and you don't have to in this field. So anybody that comes after you like that or threatens you, you do not have to work with them ethically. You don't even have to do a termination of services if you feel threatened. So the police were there and everything to make sure, that this person didn't follow through with what he was going to do, which was coming up there. And I guess he was going to give us the business or even worse. And he couldn't find her or the children, and he wound up getting arrested. So, it gets really bad. But these are some of the reasons why I don't work in domestic violence. But I can do the trauma from the acts of domestic violence witnessed by these kids. I can do the trauma or the effects of trauma from this. And also, a lot more times than not, the perpetrators end up abusing the kids. Now, fellas, I'm not discriminating against you. The reason that I am talking about the women is because the majority of individuals who are in domestic violence situations are women inflicted by men. But can men be abused as well? Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So one other thing, I thought back to a kid that I worked with all the way back in Nashville. And so I'm going to tell you that story real quick before we move on. This was the first time I worked with a child that had murdered someone. I was very young. I may have still been in my mid 20s by then. So just at a master's level. And I can't remember. I think I was getting my master's degree. I'm pretty sure. So this was in the prison system in Nashville. This is also a reason why I don't work in the prison system. Not my population, although you got to give them some love when they come out of jail and do the right thing and want to get jobs. But working inside of the prison, like in the jail, I'm not forensics, not my thing. Remember, we all have limitations. But as you're growing up in psychology and you're in school, you learn what you can work with and what you cannot. Another example for me are pedophiles. Cannot work with them, won't go near them. Let the professionals who deal with that population deal with them. The trauma part I will deal with in the children. So this was my first time, working in the prison system and was called to work with get this, 13-year-old who was in juvie, who actually murdered a man in cold blood who was sitting in his car. Just sitting in his car waiting for somebody, and this little kid goes up to him, shoots him in the head. I'll never ever forget this because I found out that the man that was sitting in the car was a husband, an attorney, and had a pregnant wife. If you're looking at me in a video, I have my head down because I will never forget that moment. And so I'm like, man, goodness gracious, why would a child do this? This was the first child, I believe, in the state of Tennessee who was tried as an adult. Yeah, and I had to go see him. And I can still see that day when I close my eyes. And my question, I still remember his name and everything. And mind you, I don't remember the clients that I talk about in his blog. I do not remember their names. Just what happened, the situation, and what I learned from them, which is what I write about. A lot of the reports and stuff that I did do for these kids, I told you guys I still have them, but I don't look at them because I want a lot of this stuff to remain confidential. This kid, I remember his name. Never forgotten this moment, and it's been about 30 years, maybe 32 at the moment. So, I said to him, why did you shoot the man in the car? He's a child. He said, I don't know. I don't know. When I work with boys who have become violent, when I have worked with them against girls, I'll say, why are you hitting the girls? And they'll say, I don't know. And sometimes I ask a little girl today, why did you hit her? And she's like, I don't know. She deserved it. I mean, sometimes they truly don't know why they make the decisions they do. So, in the field of psychology, there are times when I say I have to put the puzzle pieces together because you do. You have to put the puzzle pieces together. So, in the case of the boy that shot the attorney, he was being initiated into a gang. And he had to go out and he had to shoot someone to show that he was worthy of being in this gang. Yep, tried as an adult, is probably still in prison now. Grew up in jail. The boy that I was working with who saw his mother when he was about 2, 3 years old, Um, he continued to come to therapy. He didn't want to be that way like his dad. So that was actually a pretty good outcome. I don't know exactly what happened to him after therapy, but that was a pretty good outcome. But you see, sometimes they just don't know. So we have to put the puzzle together. For the boy who saw his mom get thrown, not pushed, thrown into the chair, he had to understand, for example, where his anger came from. Where his anger came from. Learn behavior, but also model. It was modeled to him from his dad. And then angry because he saw his mom hurt. You know, uh, you have to put the puzzle pieces together, and sometimes it's going to require you to do more work, more research, more guidance from other seasoned psychologists. So never be afraid to consult with others, and ask questions. Now, when you go back and you think about my blog, Twin Flames, if you haven't read that, that was actually really popular. One of the two really popular blogs. And on top of the different acts of violence that those kids saw, the father thinking that he needed to protect them from demons by murdering them. And, you know, trauma may not feel the same to kids, but there are certain symptoms that are the same. And so the part about seeing ghosts doesn't really apply here unless they're telling me, like Twin Flames, that their father was seeing dark angels or seeing demons, and he was taken away because he took that to a different level where I have to protect my kids, and so I am going to murder my kids because these demons are going to take my kids away. So you have to be able to divide all of this up between mental health and nebulous kids. And it's all right to consult with someone about it, because actually I heard from two other therapists last week whose clients told them that they see ghosts. So it's not always easy, and that's why you have those of us who are more seasoned, and then there are people far more seasoned than me that can help. So make sure you use everything that you have in front of you to assess the situation, to put the puzzle piece together. Read a couple books if you have to, and consult with other people. Um, and so, have I encountered, one of the questions that this caller had was, have I encountered children that have been neglected who were also nebulous children? Yes, I have. I have. Twin Flames were, I'm not going to say they were fully neglected, but they were semi neglected because the father had so many mental health concerns himself. And I think I wrote in the blog that I didn't know what happened to their mother or where she was. I think originally, and I can definitely look this up, I think originally she was in a picture and she had the same kind of visions dad did, but over time I didn't hear from her or about her any longer. So these were kids who, if I recall correctly, and if I'm wrong, I will correct this because I might actually look up some stuff about them. Um, the mother may have been more neglectful. So, yes. And the way that you uncover that is by your interview questions. Now, the kids that I worked with, remember, were kids from community mental health. So you're just grabbing names, the first name off of the waiting list. So it's not like a few of the kids were recommended. I was recommended to the parents, true enough, especially testing. A lot of my recommendations for testing were word of mouth. But kids in therapy, I'm pulling them off of the wait list. Community mental health has a very long wait list. They always do. They're just overwhelmed. There's not enough of us practicing psychology or in mental health. So there's always a long waiting list. And so I will pull kids off of the waiting list. So I'm always unaware, for the most part, if kids can see ghosts or not. Now, there might be some other health professionals mental health, who will tell me they have auditory hallucinations or visual hallucinations. And I'll go, oh, I wonder if they can see ghosts. But those are things that you get to. It's not something that I ask immediately. The other thing is that um, when you pull them off of a waiting list, you're only getting bits and pieces from the paperwork about what happened. So you need to be able to do a firm and strong clinical interview, and it can be structured, it can be unstructured. You guys in mental health know what I'm talking about. Along with some of the data that you collect to make an informed decision about these kids and what's supposed to happen. And so when I encountered nebulous children who were neglected, um, it was just a handful, just a handful. And I think with these kids is I never called the state or anything on any nebulous child. I know that for a fact. And so the thing with these parents is that as I learned about them, if you want to talk about neglect, it was more so they're not listening to me. I'm trying to tell them that I can see ghosts, or they think I need mental health treatment and I don't. I just need to figure out how to stop from seeing ghosts. Or, my parents think something's wrong with me, but it's not. I just can't tell them I can see ghosts. So you see the difference? So I really wouldn't even call it neglect. It was more so being void of information toward their parents, or their parents not understanding the ability to see ghosts. And so they were kind of like, fix my kid. My kid is saying they see ghosts. There's people Google stuff and they'll say this is a visual hallucination, blah, 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 blah. When I would just see the kids by themselves or when they were absent from their parents, then they would talk more about their relationships with their parents, but also about their ability to see ghosts. And so that's when they would say, I did tell my parents didn't listen, or I did tell my parents, and my parents were like, oh, you're just, nuts and stuff like that. So name calling sometimes, not to the extent where these kids were not well taken care of. Um, when both parties, parents and kids, feel comfortable with you, teenagers and kids, they will talk to you about these things, but you have to be very impartial. You have to remove your biases and stereotypes. You don't assume, get to the root of the problem. Get the facts, don't assume. It's a good question, Miss Caller, to ask me that about neglected children. I'm trying to think of what else I want to say about neglected kids. That's about it. But what I'm going to say is, if you're getting into this field, it can be exhausting. It can be stressful. There's a high burnout rate if you don't take care of yourselves. You have to do that. That is my advice to the students that I work with when I am teaching. That is my advice to new clinicians, despite your field. So if it's social work, I'll tell you the burnout rate is high and you need to take care of yourselves. So somebody asked me recently, given everything you write about, because more people are starting to read the blog, which is great. I really appreciate that. Thank you. They asked me, would you change your mind or do something different other than psychology? And I have to share with you guys that I actually wanted to be a marine biologist, believe it or not. Not a lot of people know that about me. And being a marine biologist, I would have, of course, liked to work with dolphins. I like sea turtles and dolphins. I actually like whales, just not orcas. Orcas are beautiful, but I just never been a fan of them. I'm probably more scared of orcas than I need to be, but I do like dolphins and I do like sea turtles. So I could almost see myself, working down in, Orlando or Miami somewhere in my next life. But I do like my field a lot. I think it has been worth it. I have a strong appreciation for it. I am doing different things now, like the podcast and the blog. I'm helping more people. I'm volunteering, which also helps people. My kids are getting older, so I'm finding a lot of stuff to do that keeps me from being bored in psychology. I'm also an Aquarius. You know, we get bored pretty easily. So if I'm not changing my hair color one week, I'm talking about to my mom and to my husband who I'm going to volunteer with next. So yeah, I will share with you all that I have been getting happier in psychology. I've learned how to not burn out. I have learned to take care of me in the process of working with children and families. And I'm more, because I've gotten older now, I'm more of a mentor to people as opposed to being that um, young psychologist who had all of the energy. I walk down the hallways and hear the kids cursing, for example, and I'm like, ah, what the hell? I'll curse too, you know? So just kidding, parents. I do correct them sometimes. So that is going to be the end of this blog. I know we steered a little bit from ghosts, but I do like to answer your questions when you do have them. I know you guys are out there dealing with, you know, families as well. And so that's why we have each other. Now, blog 43 is all about possessions. If you can, I do want you to read that blog. Also, please like and share the blog too. You know, you can like each one, and that helps me. So, there were a lot of questions in December, right before Christmas. So, I'm not sure what was happening right before Christmas, but there were people asking me questions about possessions. Ironically, it's April, and I have gotten at least 3 questions about possessions recently. So next week's blog is going to address those questions as well. I'm not going to put them in a blog on Friday, but they will be addressed on the podcast next week. So join me next week. We are going to talk about possessions. It's actually a topic that I do like to talk about. I don't want it to happen to any of you, but I do like to talk about it. So you all have a good rest of the week and a good weekend. And I will talk to you next week.